Hello, thank you guys for joining us today and welcome to our webinar. Today we are going beyond generic EPDs and we are going to be talking about how Permasteelisa is transforming facade sustainability with project-specific data. So we have a really exciting and informative conversation for you guys today. I am joined today by Andrea Zani, who is the R&D Innovation Manager and Sustainability Lead at Permasteelisa. So welcome, Andrea.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
And I'm also joined by Nick Gallardi, who is an EPD expert here at One Click LCA. Nick, great to have you.
Hi, Aileen. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, and my name is Aileen Carroll. I am a sustainability communications here at One Click LCA. And so we will get going and dive right into the topic. But first, I do want to ask you guys, where are you joining from today? So I know a lot of you are going to be joining us from the US and Canada, but if you're in another country, we'd love to hear that. And then also, what city, state, or province are you joining us from? Well, we love to hear where our viewers are. And so you can go ahead and put that information in the chat. And we'll also do a live poll. So in just a second, you'll see on your screen a poll. And we are wondering, what sector are you in? Are you in AEC? Are you manufacturer? Are you a consultant, or are you in another sector? And if you did choose other, we'd love it if you could go ahead and put that sector in the chat as well. So you guys can get to know each other there in the chat, and then we'd also like to get to know you as well. So thank you so much for answering that poll. I'll just give a moment to let you guys complete that. All right. Thank you again so much for that. And so today's webinar is brought to you by One Click LCA. You may already be familiar with the platform, but if you're not, we are the world's leading sustainability software for construction and manufacturing. We are an easy-to-use LCA and EPD platform with all the world's data and integrations. We have compliance tools for over 80 global standards and certifications. Our database, which you'll hear a little bit more about today, is the world's largest with over 250,000 LCA data sets. We have over 20 integrations with the other software tools that you guys love to use. And we've been in business for more than 20 years. So we power the makers of a zero carbon future, and those makers are you. So we're glad to have you here today. And we will get going here in just a minute. So I am going to hand over now to Nick, who is going to start us talking about what is embodied carbon, and he's going to get into more details. But before he starts, I do want to invite you, if you have questions throughout the webinar, we will be monitoring the chat and the questions tab. So please hop into the chat, put your questions there. If you want to jump on the questions tab and ask a question there as well, we'll be looking at those throughout the webinar, and we'll be answering your questions in the chat. So please be active in there and let us know if you have any questions. And with that, Nick, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Aileen. Yeah, so I'll start us off with a little bit of background on this topic before we dive into Andrea's topic and the main presentation for today. So I want to start off with talking about what is embodied carbon. So we're going to go with the definition as embodied carbon refers to the greenhouse gas emissions arising from the manufacturing, the transportation, the installation, maintenance, and the disposal of building materials. And this is coming from the Carbon Leadership Forum. So all of this embodied carbon, you've probably heard it thrown around. We've at least seen kind of the definition. It includes kind of all these, really the embodied carbon emission impacts from all these different stages that revolve our different materials. Now, why does it matter? Why are we talking about it so much? It's because of this chart right here, and more specifically what this chart is talking to us about. And if we can look on the chart, the tan color is to represent operational carbon, like our energy, our water that's going through our buildings. And the green portion of the chart is representing embodied carbon, or really the materials, those items that we talked about, the disposal of such. And we've had such a great focus on decarbonizing our energy grids. And that is kind of what this chart is showing. As we decarbonize our energy grids, we're kind of forgetting this other portion of our CO2 emissions, which is the embodied carbon portion. And that's really the materials of these buildings, these things that we're building, every portion. It doesn't matter if it's a building or an actual product. This is kind of the portion that we are forgetting, and that is why there's a bigger focus on this. And we'll start seeing more of a bigger focus throughout time. So right now, the target is all construction is to create, or right now, the construction creates at least 40% embodied carbons by 2030. That is the target to reduce such, at least by the World Building Council. Right now, cities are expected to double by 2060. So this is adding an extra 230 gigatons of embodied carbon. It's really hard to kind of visualize or get a tangible sense of what 230 gigatons of embodied carbon is. So the best way to explain it is that's about adding a whole entire New York City every 29 days until 2060. So that is quite a lot of building materials. That's quite a lot of emissions and work that needs to go into it. So we're certainly starting to see that ramp up, and that is why we need to focus on reducing these materials. So I'm talking about reducing it. I'm talking about reducing this embodied carbon, the big importance of such, but how are we going to do that? Thankfully, there is a tool that we can utilize, or really an assessment, and that is a life cycle assessment, or an LCA. So this is a process where we can evaluate our environmental burdens associated with a product, a process, or an activity by identifying and quantifying energy and materials used and waste released to the environment. The assessment includes the entire life cycle of the product, process, or activity, encompassing extracting and processing raw materials, manufacturing, transportation, and distribution, the use, reuse, maintenance, recycling, and ultimately the final disposal of that product, process, or activity. So there's a lot of things that really goes on with an LCA. Well, thankfully, we've also got it put it in a modular way, which makes it very easy for us. So the main stage that is focused in the construction sector is actually the product stage that we start seeing in the bottom left-hand corner. And that's the stage that encompasses really the raw material extraction, transportation to us as a manufacturer, and us, manufacturing that. Do we put other materials in it? Do we put extra energy? How do we really make this? And all that together really encompasses a big portion of what we call the product stage, and what is the minimum requirement for us to do in an LCA. And that is also the main part where we really dive into our data. We want to collect our internal data really well. We want to have a really great firm grasp on the materials, the energy, and how things are utilized throughout our supply chain. As we start moving from the bottom left towards the right, really in the further stages of our product's life cycle, we start to get less of a grasp on this data. It's harder to collect it from our recycler. How much energy are they using? It's a little bit tough to do that. So that's why it's really important for us to have really great quality generic data for us to rely on. So that is why and how One Click LCA comes into this space as well. So we have a data promise on here. So we want to integrate all publicly and freely available LCA data that is out there so that all of our users can be able to have access to that. The ultimate goal of an LCA at the end of the day, it is a model. So we just want it to best accurately represent our product as much as possible in reality. So we go through our own internal processes to review kind of this data that comes in from different public databases. We want to ensure that we have the latest versions of these LCA databases and EPDs. So we update these on a bi-weekly basis. And then depending on certain different types of user accounts, we have different types of ways that you can even be able to upload your own data if need be. And here are some of those databases that I ended up mentioning. So there are quite a lot of different databases out there, and being able to access all of them is great so you can hone in on precisely what are your materials or what are these transportations, or specifically who is my supplier. Now, all of this data is very informative, and we want to use this information, and actually the builders and architects who are buying our products as manufacturers want to use this data, and they want it in a consolidated form. And that consolidated form comes in a document, and that document happens to be an EPD, or an environmental product declaration. So really the best way to think about this, the way I really like to think about this in most things, is with food. So an EPD is very similar to a food label. So I've replaced our typical looking food label with essentially the impacts of an EPD in here. And we can kind of see some very similar things. I want to point out kind of the declared unit just above the very first top bar. That declared unit is pretty much like our serving size. It's giving us a baseline on how much are we talking about, so I can know how many calories or proteins that I'm taking in at the end of the day. And talking about calories, that's kind of the most important thing that we end up focusing on. It just happens to be. And very similarly, that happens to be the global warming potential too. That is the most highly sought after number, I would say, currently in today's market. So that global warming potential really tells us, what is the carbon emissions about a certain stage in our life cycle for this declared unit or this serving size. How much are we working with? And we want this declared unit to be easily scalable for our architects, designers, and builders so that they can be able to take it into their models and be able to get, an idea of how much they're working with as well. So at the end of the day, this EPD is going to have a lot of information about kind of your product, but we also know you're a manufacturer and there's competitors out there. So there's not going to be any revealing information about your product in here. We just kind of want the basics about it, pretty much so your audience can understand, is this the product that I'm buying? Now, again, we want to make this very easy, and no PhDs are required whatsoever to make these LCAs. So we use a couple of different things that I've mentioned. So we have different tools, different databases, and we cover the whole entire value chain, whether that's your manufacturer or the builders, the architects. We connect everyone that needs to do any of these LCA purposes. And we can do every stage of a building project, which is great. So whether you're looking at the design of your product or building project, or we're looking at kind of a built product or built project, we can be able to handle it all. And the ultimate goal is we want to be able to measure these products or these buildings We want to be able to look at the data, analyze it. It's going to give us a lot of information. What are the hot spots? What are places or areas that I can invest in, that I potentially have the money for or don't have the money for, so I can effectively reduce my carbon. And now I'm not guessing anymore. And then later on, I can end up showing my impact and actually see, is this making a difference, or do I need to go with another prescriptive path? So for my summary of a little bit of background with all of this, the goal is to identify opportunities to improve our products or our buildings. And really that comes in a couple different forms. That's cutting on energy, that's cutting on raw materials. At the end of the day, it's savings. It's savings that also translate into sustainability. Kind of nice. It's all about informing decision makers. I talked about all this data as manufacturers is going to come into an EPD packet. These EPDs are very valuable for even sometimes your own manufacturers, or even for the builders and suppliers who are going to buy if you have a finished product. And then we can also look at the indicators for your environmental performance, see where you rank amongst your competitors or amongst the industry average. And then all of this is great information for your marketing team so that you can be able to stand on something and actually have scientifically and data-backed information to rely on, especially if you're trying to make any statements about your embodied carbon. Now, with all that information, I do want to hand it over to our guest speaker today, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Nick. Great presentation. And I think a perfect segue to jump into a little bit more detail on how we use it, one click in Permasteelisa, and how we can drive, decarbonization in the built environment. I'm Andrea Zani, Innovation Manager, Sustainability Lead at Permasteelisa Group. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or over email. You can scan the QR code. Happy to continue the conversation after the webinar. So we're going to go through a few things in the next 20-25 minutes. A brief introduction of who we are, what we're doing on kind of trying to pursue zero carbon emissions within Permasteelisa Group, and then we will dive into examples on how we use the One Click LCA for the first EPD for custom facades in North America, and then some example on how we actually use this tool to drive decarbonization in our systems. So who we are a leading international facade, specialty facade contractor. We operate in all the continents, North America, Europe, Asia, Australia. We've been around for 50 years, and we clad more or less over 20 million square meters of facades. So quite a bit. We plan to do the same for the next 50 years. So we definitely need to decrease our carbon emissions associated to those 20 million potential square meter of facade. What we do is we design, engineer, manufacture, and install our facade. So we have we cover the entire spectrum. So this is one of our key strengths because we can implement, life cycle assessment engineering straight into our design processes, and then you can see how beneficial it is across the project to actually drive decarbonization. We work on landmark projects across the globe. Actually, a fun fact: I think that 7 out of the 25 tallest building in the world they have our facades on it. And here you can see some example in North America, in New York. We have quite a few skyscrapers and buildings with our facades, and we specialize in highly complex highly complex system and custom system. So that's an important caveat to remember, because we don't have like a product off the shelf. So every time we need to generate an LCA specifically for the system that we're developing for that project. And here is where One Click comes super handy, but also where we can actually drive change, because we can really optimize the system and their emissions and general environmental impacts for the project. We strongly believe that innovation in facades start and kind of stop with sustainability, among other fields where we're really investing a lot of resources. So that's really our focus in the next future. We are focusing on decarbonization, climate resilience, circularity, and ethical procurement, of course. And it's kind of that layer of transparency. It's where we want to go towards, and having basically all our projects with that ingredient label that Nick was saying before, right? So we can give you the actual picture of what we're installing from an embodied carbon standpoint and environmental impacts. So what, in practical terms, right, the facade is one of the key components in a building. Embodied carbon emission footprint, right below, the foundations and primary structure. Just after that, kind of in the third spot, you have the envelope. So it can have a significant impact between, let's say, 15 to 25%. It's quite common, and now that we are seeing more mass timber structure, or that they're really optimizing the structure from an embodied carbon perspective, the facade is getting more and more important to be tackled next. So we really want to drive that reduction as much as we can. So we're trying to accelerate the low carbon curtain wall, low environmental impacts curtain wall. So we're focusing on these three main aspects: ethical procurement, embodied carbon assessment or life cycle assessment, and then resource efficiency and circularity. Ethical procurement is key, working with our suppliers to get the best material possible for the project. It's always guaranteeing the quantity, the quality, the safety, and of our subsystem, our materials, but kind of lead that into a greener procurement. Kind of cornerstone is embodied carbon life cycle assessment of our systems, because that enables us to dive into the data and provide options and explore explore variation in the design to actually drive optimization, and then of course circularity is a big one in the coming years. How to reduce as minimum as possible the waste stream, and explore potentially new business model to enable the circular facades. In the last few years, we made really good progress. We have more than 5 projects now between Europe and the US with EPDs for our custom curtain wall. So there are project-specific EPDs, and we can dive into a little bit more in the next few slides. And there are more coming. So I think that we have other 5 coming in the next year alone. We, as I said before, we achieved the first EPD, project-specific curtain wall EPD for North America for a project in California, UC Berkeley Gateway, and we were able to achieve a 15% reduction of global warming potential compared to the CLF baseline on that project, using One Click, using life cycle assessment, and really drive change. And and then we are, bringing life cycle assessment and embodied carbon assessment for new tender and projects. And on the side, we are also tracking scope 1, 2, and 3 of our major business units to try to bring carbon neutrality to Permasteelisa by 2040 in Europe and the US, and hopefully submitting soon for SBTI as well. So we're making progress. But let's dive into the life cycle assessment, how we use One Click to inform the design, to optimize the design, and to then generate the EPD for the project. So we started a few years ago and realized that facades, and especially custom curtain wall, are complex systems. We have multiple materials, quantities that change on every project, way that you install the facade changes. So you have a lot of variabilities and a lot of data from the suppliers, a lot of data from us. So in the past, we were trying to submit all this data to our architects and clients, and sometimes they were misinterpreted. We were counting incorrect material quantities, double counting. So at the end, the picture was not really accurate. So we said, okay, let's take the task in our hands, and let's develop a life cycle assessment of our systems that covers the entire life cycle of our system. So from A1 to the C stage. Of course, we have most of the primary data, as also Nick remembered before, between the A1 to A5 stage. So that's where we really put a lot of effort to try to get as much primary data as possible. But of course, we can track the entire life cycle. So doing this, right, we can offer really important feedback early on projects. If you engage with us, right, we can have quickly generating really accurate early on assessment of our systems, and also provide, I think, the most powerful tool. It's the design optioneering, like exploring options to really see what makes sense from a financial cost perspective and from a carbon perspective. There are definitely a lot of options that can be explored that can drive positive change without affecting the budget of the project. And then during construction documentation stage, we can refine this assessment, get more and more granular, and get more precise, and leading to the actual third-party verified EPD during the construction phase. So how are we actually doing this, right? Given that we have custom systems that varies on every project, we are able to extract really accurate takeoff and bill of materials from our 2D and 3D models. We model in 3D every single unit, every single facade panels on the job, so we can have actually accurate takeoff of every materials on the job, potentially down to the screw, and then link to each material the most appropriate EPD from our suppliers if they have, and we're engaging them daily to get better and better data directly from our supplier. Or if they're not available, we use EPD database and standard database that are available in One Click, and sometimes we generate custom data points, modifying the EPDs database to match as close as possible our suppliers, and then import them in One Click because it allows that too. So it's really flexible, and then it really comes handy to use One Click in our assessments. And then, of course, right, we monitor our energy consumptions, emissions, all the materials, ancillary materials that goes into the production of our panels and the waste stream. So we we know how much emissions we have when we assemble and manufacture these unitized curtain wall panels. And then, of course, right, we know where they're coming from, who our suppliers are, how they're transported to us, how we're going to transport to site, so we can explore, different options from a supply chain standpoint, both in terms of like the actual suppliers, but also exploring different ways that we can transport these goods across the countries or from different continents. Because given that we work across different regions, sometimes we get glass from Europe, so we can really explore and dive into the data. That's the beauty of the life cycle assessment. And then, of course, the emissions that goes into the installation of our system. So how we did it for UC Berkeley Gateway, that it's our first EPD in the US with One Click LCA. So we started, you can see here, from detailed drawings, 2D drawings that allows us to have early takeoff, really accurate early takeoffs, and then those 2D drawings are modeling in these 3D fabrication models that we use for the actual fabrication of each component, but also to order materials, to track quantities, to engage with the suppliers. So we can have one source of truth that is coming from our production models to extract all the materials quantity, bill of materials that we need then for the life cycle assessment. Then we develop an easy tool in-house to add the quantities and track them across the different stages, considering the waste stream, so we know where each kilos goes in each life stage, so we can do mass balance. That is really important in life cycle assessment, so we can have a really accurate way to track it, and then an easy way to import it in one click. So we have those spreadsheets. We can just copy and paste the numbers in one click, so that it's really convenient. And the other main advantage that we have using one click is that we can create base templates that are based on the location where we're manufacturing, the production facility that we're using, and general supply chain information. So we have templates that we can use on multiple projects and adapt to capture the small changes that might happen from one project to the next. And then, of course, it's really easy to update the bill of materials directly in one click. The other main advantage is the ability to use multiple data points. That is a mix between EPD from suppliers, custom data, or typical data from databases. So that allows a lot of flexibility that is really important for custom systems that have a lot of data points. As you can see, these are all data points that we need to capture a curtain wall panels. So you can get easy on 40, 50 data points that are materials, processes, and so on. So that having that flexibility to dive into the data, it's really important. And then, of course, right, you can standardize and input the EPD descriptions, set up all the different steps that you need for the validation, review, and certification of your EPD. So it's one-stop shop, and it's really saving us time to do that on multiple projects, multiple systems. It's really streamlining how we approach lifecycle assessment and EPD generation in our day-to-day operations. And then, of course, right, we can plot that ingredient list that Nick was saying before, right, with all the environmental impacts of our system. So not just global warming potential, but ozone depletion, acidification, eutrophication, and so on. So really useful. We can generate this quickly now that we went through kind of a few rounds of it. So we feel confident in the results. The reviewer knows how we do things. So it's really quick for us to generate at least a life cycle assessment also early on projects. And here you can scan the QR code if you want to see an example of the EPD. And as Nick was saying, right, the LCA allows you to dissect the data, right? Really jump into the data and see where your impacts are in terms of life cycle stage. But I think that most important in like materials, right? Which materials are contributing? Which materials are the hotspots in the design and manufacturing and assembly of the system. So here you can see that we can generate carbon footprint assessment for the different wall types that we have, right? And different wall types will have a widely different end results because of the material quantities, because of the features that they have. So it's really important to actually assess the system that you are going to design and install on the building. If you're trying to simplify and saying the facade is 300 kilograms of CO2, in my opinion, you're oversimplifying. Sometimes you can if you have standard repeating elements, but especially for us where we do custom, the range could be massive. So having that granularity and having the possibility to do this exercise on the different elements, it's really, really key. And then also allows to understand sometimes where the carbon is hidden, right? Sometimes we think at the material level, and we think, okay, terracotta, for example, on this project, it's relatively a low carbon material, right? But then when you translate that material into the system, in this specific project, a low carbon material was actually quite intensive because of the location where this project has been built in California. We have high seismic loads, so to support a really heavy terracotta, you need a really heavy aluminum substructure. So a relatively low carbon materials was becoming a really high level carbon emission system. So the LCA allows us to see where the impacts were, right? And in this case, you can see that you have basically more than 50%, basically 60% comes from aluminum, the impact. So how we can modify the system, how can we optimize the system to use less aluminum to support, a low carbon materials like terracotta. So that's kind of unlock a lot of potential. And then just a few examples on why we could use the life cycle assessment to actually drive towards a lower carbon facades. Here you can see a really typical facade unit that we see on many projects. A vision portion, right? Your typical transparent window, shadow box that is kind of like an opaque panel, some shading, vertical fins to provide shading and operational savings benefits. So nothing too fancy, pretty standard. And we did a life cycle assessment, and you can see that from an embodied carbon standpoint, from a GWP standpoint, you have that 80% of the impact lies into the A1 stage, so the material sourcing, extraction and material sourcing, and then the remaining, it's spread across the remaining A2 to A5. We focus on this, the product and construction stage. And here you can see how the breakdown with the different materials and different stages, right? You can see that aluminum extrusions here, the aluminum fins are quite heavy contributors. The glazing comes next, and then you have production, transportations to site. So you see that you have really granular output, so you can see, okay, where we want to focus on. We want to focus on optimizing the aluminum extrusion for the framing. We want to optimize the fins and the glazing. That's what is going to drive most of the impact. So we identify potential actions that we can take. Optimizing the facade size, the module size, is action one. Trying to optimize the fin shape and depth to guarantee still energy savings from operational standpoint by reducing materials. Expander glazing, so modifying some of the assembly of the portion of the shadow box, optimizing the extrusion thicknesses, and then the glass thickness in the unit. So trying first to optimize the system, trying to save materials before jumping into buying low carbon materials, right? If we say save materials, that's always the first action that we will want to take. And you can see here that implementing some of these actions, so increasing the unit width, in this case from a 5 feet unit to a 7 feet unit, was bringing like a 10% decrease in embodied carbon, and then optimizing the fin potentially has a big impact there as well, and then the glass thicknesses as well. So implementing these changes that are cost neutral or sometimes cost savings, you can get a 30% reductions. But without knowing the baseline, right, without doing an LCA, you don't really know how to quantify this. So this is where we feel that the life cycle assessment, it's really, really important because it unlocks these savings early on in the project and potentially without impacting the cost of it. And now that we optimize, right, the system, so it's nice and lean and efficient, we can dive into optimizing supply chain, right? Because with life cycle assessment, you can also dive into these aspects. So what about low carbon aluminum? What about low carbon glass, right? They're available in the market, so we can engage with suppliers to see can we procure them for the projects, and what's the potential benefit on that specific project. So as a big reductions there, and then optimize the supply chain, how we move things across the different suppliers, and how we bring them to site. So there are all things that we can explore from a supply chain that can drive further reduction. And you can see here that we are able to get up to 55-60% compared to the original baseline. So some key takeaways to wrap the presentation. Engage with us early as possible. We can provide also high-level feedback. If you're exploring different options, we can give you some feedback, because I think that's where you can get the most out of it and the best possible savings. And we can link them potentially to cost information, so you have a holistic metrics to assess options. Integrate materials strategically, right? Don't think about only the materials, but start thinking about how that material will be implemented into the system, right? Because you could have hidden carbon somewhere if you don't think about how the material is integrated. Plan, the module, the size of the unit, facade elements wisely, because if you do a lot of small elements, you have a lot of aluminum per square meter or square foot of the facade, so that drives your carbon emissions, both from an embodied carbon and operational carbon standpoint. And then design with the full carbon impact in mind. Think about both the embodied carbon and operational carbon. And then lastly, engage. Let's start conversation. I think that when you start conversation, start implementing into specifications, drawings. That's where general design documents. That's where you actually have the most benefit out of it, and we can all work together to drive decarbonization and more sustainable facades. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. That was really insightful, informative. We always talk about data being so important here at One Click LCA, and your examples of how that really project-specific data makes a huge difference, and all the nuances that you guys have found through doing a life cycle assessment. That was really incredible to hear. And if anyone in the audience is interested in doing the same thing, learning how to do a life cycle assessment, learning a little bit more about how it can affect your business, we are actually going to put up a poll if you would like a demo from a sustainable manufacturing expert, or if you are in the AEC industry, or if you're a consultant and you'd like a demo about how you can use an LCA and then using EPDs that manufacturers like Permasteelisa create. We'd love to talk to you. So if you'd like a demo, please click yes on the poll that just popped up on your screen, and we will reach out to you and schedule that one-on-one consultation. If you're not ready for it now, you can just click no, and you can learn more. Check out Permasteelisa's EPDs, the QR code that Andrea showed earlier. You can use that. You'll be sent the recording of this webinar after today, so you can find the QR code when you rewatch the recording, just in case you didn't grab it earlier. And then check out our website, oneclicklca.com, where you can find out more about LCAs and EPDs in general. And I would also like to take this opportunity to invite you. We are having a live training week, April 7th through 11th, so that's coming right up. And we have both LCA and EPD boot camps available. These are free trainings. They're week-long, fully immersive training, so you can learn a lot more about LCAs and EPDs. It's just 2 hours a day, so it's not the full day, but you'll definitely get a lot out of it if you scan the QR code that's on your screen now, or you can visit the website that's listed at the bottom of this slide. You can register for whichever track you'd like to learn more about. And I am going to minimize that screen a little bit. And I would just like to, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Andrea, again, for your presentations today. Really insightful. And I want to take just this last moment before we let everyone go. Nick, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I think, I guess reiterating pretty much what Andrea had said, the idea of getting started early, whether that's contacting your suppliers, whether they're the manufacturers, whether they're your raw material suppliers, just getting started early in this process is always great. You have more control over your designs and what you're able to do earlier in the process. And at the end of the day, materials are kind of the biggest culprit. I think that's something that I would definitely want to underscore. So focusing on materials is going to be a bigger focus from here on to the future, pretty much. So those are my big key takeaways.
And Andrea, I'd like to invite you the same. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I think to reiterate, right, it's engage with experts, engage with suppliers, manufacturers to get the handle as soon as possible and explore options. I think that that's really key, right? I think that we need to be all flexible and explore design iterations and see what could be, cost achievable, but at the same time trying to drive more sustainable built environment, and in our case, sustainable facades. So I think that's kind of the key. Just dive into the detail, ask questions. I think that a lot of people, it's really eager to engage with you early to get the most out of it.
Great. Well, thank you again, both for your insights, and everyone in the audience. If you guys want to keep the conversation going, you can find both Nick and Andrea on LinkedIn. So do reach out and talk to them, and we will see you on the next webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you.